Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for March 8, 2018. It's a beautiful day outside, much better than our last scheduled meeting. If you have a cell phone with you, now would be a good time to shut it off, if you would, please. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time today, what we'll do here is take care of a little housekeeping at the beginning, and then we will go through each case under the items requiring separate votes. We'll ask the applicant to come forward, give us his or her name and address for the record, tell us a little something about what it is they're here asking us for. Commissioners may or may not have questions for him or her. If there is someone here who wants to be heard on an item, they'll be invited down to give us their views. We may or may not have questions for that person. Then there will be some discussion, perhaps, amongst the commissioners, and we'll vote on each item in turn. If you have an item that you're interested in being heard on, there are some sheets like this out on the table in the hallway. If you'll fill it out and bring it up to us, that would be much appreciated. It kind of helps us manage our discussion a little better. And we'll start. First item on the agenda is the receipt of the minutes from the February 8th, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes for the February 8th, 2018 meeting. Would you cast your votes, please? And all the lights are working, which is always nice. They are received. Continuance requests.
Okay, we received several uncontested requests for continuance on your agenda. Item B30 for case PUD 1674 has been requested to defer to March 22nd. Item B31 for case PUD 1668 has been withdrawn. Item B32 for case C6968 is deferred to April 12th. Item B33 for case PUD 1645 is deferred indefinitely. And item B34 for PUD 1658 is also deferred indefinitely. Deferred indefinitely.
Is there anybody here today who wanted to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move approval.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 30 through 34. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued.
We also received two new requests for continuance for item B9 on the agenda for case PV 103 to defer to March 22nd, and item B22 for SP 504, which was withdrawn.
Is there anybody here today who wanted to be heard on either of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
Motion.
Second. I have a motion and a second to continue items 9 and 22. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued. Are there any other continuance requests? No? If not, we'll proceed to the items to be heard, the first part of which is the consent docket.
Yes, there are 9 items on consent. 9 items on consent since one was continued. Number 9 was on the consent docket, which was continued. For the record, item number 1 is ABC 921. It's an overlay of PUD 831 district. Item 2 is PC 10528 to rezone 141 Northeast 13th Street. Item 3 is CE 970 to close an alleyway north of 141 Northeast 13th. Item 4 is PUD SP 1300A. It's a site plan review for PUD 1300. Item 5 is C6970, the final plat of JJMTC. Item 6 is PUD SP 66. It's a specific plan for PUD 1515. Item 7 is C6969, the final plat of Mustang Park, Section 1. Item 8 is ABC 922 for an ABC 2 overlay of C3 district. Item 10 is C-6421, the extension of the preliminary plat of Ledgestone.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve items 1 through 8 and number 10. Would you cast your votes, please? They are approved.
Under items requiring separate vote, number 11 is case SP 503 to permit the expansion of an existing hospital use in the PUD 472 district.
Is the applicant present?
Paul LaFever, 522 Colcord, for the applicant, the Oklahoma Heart Hospital South. The hospital is seeking a special permit to expand its existing facilities off of I-240 and Sooner. The proposal involves a 6-story expansion and a 2-story parking garage. The parking garage will have one level below ground and just one above. We're not aware of any objections. Be happy to go into any detail that you would like. Also have Josh Price, who's the facility manager at the hospital, and Bill Swain and Neil Robertson here from Cardinal Engineering. So,
I have just a question, actually, of staff. It was not entirely clear to me whether what we're doing here is approving a new special permit or amending their existing special permit.
This would be a new special permit that includes the expansion.
Thank you. I wanted just to let the commissioners know, there's a peculiar thing about this property is that it has this frontage road that sort of dead ends into its driveway. And at the time that the hospital was originally permitted, and then when it was most recently re-permitted, if that's what it was, or expanded previously, there was some discussion about whether something needed to be formally done about that, because as it is, there's an existing public street that sort of just dead ends into this driveway, or into this parking area. And so when this application came across my desk, I was concerned enough about it to speak to the Director of Public Works just to find out sort of where we were. There had been discussion over the years about whether that needed to be sorted out. And since this is a substantial increase in the activities on site and so on, I just wanted to see if we needed to seize this opportunity to sort of formalize all that. However, as it turns out, he's very comfortable that it is where it needs to be. There's not actually money allocated to make those changes currently. They have a good working relationship with the hospital. It's not currently a problem. It's really sort of something that they are concerned could become a problem in the future as residential development in the area expands and traffic becomes more of an issue. So just to let you know a little bit about that and the background of it, and they're comfortable that their working relationship with the hospital is such, and that their interest in seeing this sorted out is mutual enough that it'll work itself out. So
I do have a little bit more information to share with you if you'd like on
Sure.
that topic. You are correct that this has been an issue on this site since the hospital was constructed and opened in 2010. The site's really dictating the issue here. What you're referring to as a frontage road was, when you look at the old plats and things, they were roads that were constructed to the east and the west that were dedicated to the city. The one to the west was actually called Service Road, but it was never conceptualized by ODOT or anyone else that, in fact, that's what it was. There is a certain amount of traffic that comes through the abutting residential areas. I think the report about that, though, is that those areas that find it convenient to use this as a shortcut, those areas are already established and adjacent to this property, and I'm not really seeing why we would expect that to expand in the future. These abutting neighborhoods are what they are. Now, certainly, traffic into the hospital will continue to increase over the year. They're exiting the site and going onto the public roads. In addition, there is a signal that is working its way through approval at Sooner and 77th that will be constructed, and that will hopefully assist in traffic management also.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this item? Commissioners?
You're all right. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 12 is SPUD 1018 to rezone 211 Southeast 24th Street from R4 to SPUD 1018.
Is the applicant present? Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Tanya Bryant, 211 Southeast 24th Street in Oklahoma City.
Commissioners, you'll remember that I put my foot in the middle of this, and after bouncing around in it for a while, I've decided that it's really just fine. So we met on site, we talked it through, some changes were made to the other existing signage in the area, and so my concerns about it were resolved.
Mr. Bryant, are you fine with coming to the agreement with Commissioner Powers?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I move for adoption.
Let me ask, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item today? No? So
Move for adoption.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved. Good luck with tax season.
Thank you.
Item 13 is PUD 1673 to rezone 16300 South Penn from PUD 1514 to PUD 1673.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, who's also here with me. This is a rezoning application to take what is R1 under the current PUD to a modified R1 for an active adult neighborhood. This will be a gated community. It's almost identical to the one that we did up in Valencia about a month ago. So what you'll see is a gated community, what they call, their active adult, smaller lot size, higher amenities. It's a maintenance provided for type of community. It's a reflection of what the market is demanding these days. The price point is around $250,000 for these types of houses, and usually about 1,800 square foot is the average that you'll see in these houses. There are no issues that we're aware of. We do agree with the technical evaluations. Be happy to answer any questions.
There is just a comment in the staff report that it's unclear how the common areas will be accessed from the gated community. Will they, in fact, have access, and if so, where?
Yes. So you can see here's a common area that's actually part of this PUD, and it connects to the large common area that surrounds and divides this to the balance of the Native Plains neighborhood. So there will be connectivity throughout.
Pedestrian access?
Yes, yes. And you'll see that more defined at the platting stage. But yes, there will be connectivity.
Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this matter? Commissioners?
Move approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 13. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 14 is SPUD 1038 to rezone 1300 Northwest 17th Street from PUD 714 to PUD 1038.
Hello, Ken Fitzsimmons, 1228 Northwest 36th Street. And I'm the applicant and also the owner of the property. And my request to you today is to rezone this to 1038. There's some changes that we originally had this zoned as SPUD 714. And the changes are being requested so that it matches the property that was just recently approved by the Planning Commission and City Council earlier this year. That would be SPUD 1010. And the biggest, we would not be changing density request or anything like that. The biggest change we'd be requesting, again, to match the property to the south is to allow the property to be split into 2 lots and to be able to build up to 2 dwelling units on each subdivided lot.
Let me ask if there's anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter. Commissioners, do we have questions, concerns, motions? No.
I will make a motion that we recommend approval to City Council on PUD or SPUD 1038.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 14. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 15 is SPUD 1027 to rezone 4500 Northeast 23rd Street from R1 and C3 to SPUD 1027.
Is our applicant present?
Yes, Charles Chapman, 4500 Northeast 23rd Street.
Could you tell us something about what it is you're requesting?
Well, I'm planning to develop this property at that location. The front half of it will be a business complex in the future, and the rear section of the property I want to turn into an outdoor storage facility to accommodate RV trailers, motorhomes, boats, things of that nature.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Any comments from the audience?
I'm sorry?
Any comments from the audience? Okay.
Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this item? No?
A couple of questions. Brother Chapman, there's no real detail for what you want to do on the back end of this property. And it's difficult for staff, when you read the staff report, to evaluate really the impact of what you're trying to do on the back end.
Okay. Well, after talking with John Wilson in the zoning department, he put together the application pertaining to that, and it specified, like I said, RV trailers, boats, motorhomes, because after talking with John Pettis, the councilman in my ward, they're planning to have single-family housing directly across the street, and I want to be in a position to accommodate some of those that may have a motorhome, RV trailer, boat, or something in that direction, and it's going to be a graveled yard with an 8-foot steel fence surrounding it, so it'll be properly secured, and that's the plan.
And it will only be outdoor?
Correct. It'll be an outdoor storage facility.
Okay. So nothing indoor? Nothing inside?
No, correct.
That's on the back half of the property?
Correct, that is correct. The property is 330 by 700. The front half is the 330 by 350, and then the remainder will be the 350 by 330.
Staff's provided a technical evaluation suggestion that you commit to a specific plan, which I think would help with some of your concerns. Are you in agreement with that technical evaluation, that you're going to have to come back with a specific plan?
Sure. I mean, yes, correct, no problem.
Okay.
So, how much time do we think that it would take to develop that? That's done, what, at building permit stage or prior to building permit issuance, or?
Yes, what we're asking for is a specific plan if he chooses to build any structures for the storage units. So if he comes to get a permit to build something on the back half, he would first have to come and show the planning commission a specific plan. He has a plan for the front half.
Frankly, I'm not crazy about this. Open storage with respect to its proximity to both residential property and isn't there a church next door? I think I would want to see, at a minimum, to see all of that area fenced.
That's correct. It'll be surrounded by an 8-foot tall steel fence.
On,
The 350 by 330.
okay.
The whole
Both east and west?
surrounded.
South?
Yeah,
Okay.
every,
So the outdoor storage portion?
Exactly.
I see. Okay.
correct.
Okay.
There's some concern about lighting and what the lighting will look like, particularly as it buffets R1 and what that looks like for residential areas. And so what I guess what we really need is more specifics in terms of what this is going to look like for us going into the future. But right now, we just don't really have a lot to be able to evaluate. So that really needs to be in writing. And so we need to be able to look at that. Does he need water on this property, JJ?
Required to extend.
Does-
If he builds any of the structures, he will be required to extend.
I'm aware of that.
If there's no further discussion, I'd make a motion to recommend approval of the application to City Council on PUD or SPUD 1027, subject to the technical evaluation.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval for item number 15. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 16 is SPUD 1035 to rezone 1740 Northwest 3rd from I-2 and R2 to SPUD 1035.
Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Steve Chesser with Cornerstone Architecture.
Mrs. Carrie Amundson.
What is it you're asking us for here today?
What we're wanting to do is rezone one portion that's residential, so we can extend over and have enough room for parking and to get the trucks in and out of the warehouse. The rest of it already is zoned industrial, and we've talked to the neighbors, and the people across the street are wholeheartedly approve of it.
This was an item, am I recalling correctly, that we had some question and concerns about the trucks backing into the street?
Yeah,
And-
we redid the drive. We redid some of the drives, as you can see there, showing that there won't be any off-street unloading and stuff.
The revised site plan allows for trucks to pull onto the site and pull off, heading in the right direction.
So we're satisfied with that
Yeah, this is the new site
configuration?
plan.
Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item today? Commissioners?
Are you in agreement with the technical evaluation that's provided to provide sidewalks along the frontage roads? There is a technical evaluation provided by staff that sidewalks shall be provided along both street frontages. So you'd be required to provide sidewalks
They're shown on that plan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you understand
yeah.
that it's in there and that you're in
Okay.
agreement with it.
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 16. Cast your votes, please. It's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much.
Item 17 is SP 501 to permit a telecommunication tower in the R1 district located at 2101 Northwest 16th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. We have several people that will be speaking to you today, and you are getting handed out a packet of information, all of which has been provided to staff that they have and can display on the screen as well. I might just go through briefly in the packet to orient you with what we got, and then I'll give some remarks and then hand it over to some of our speakers. What you'll see is Exhibit A is a series of documents that our RF engineer, Ramel, will go through to explain why we've got a gap in our service due to the capacity issues. Exhibit B are more RF maps that he will use in his presentation. Exhibit C is a series of photo sims that show the proposed tower from various points in the neighborhood. Exhibit D is more specifics on the site build-out and the technical data. Exhibit E is the map showing the alternative sites that our site acquisition agents looked at. And finally, Exhibit F is the letter justifying the need for us to be here before you. So what our special permit is a permit to erect a 100-foot telecommunication tower. When we first set out to file this application, it was a standard steel monopole that had a chain link fence surrounding the equipment. We became aware of protest, and so we had a meeting, heard their concerns. Some of the concerns dealt with the aesthetics of the steel monopole. So we ran it up the flagpole and talked to people that made the decisions as to whether or not we could go to a stealth design. For those of you who are on the commission that haven't been around long enough to have heard other cell tower cases, the stealth design is a design to try to mask what the tower is. There's a couple options. You have clock towers, bell towers, or flagpoles. Ultimately, the decision was made that a stealth design would in fact work, and they could make that work with what they needed to provide. And if you look at the in Exhibit C in those photo sims, you will see various shots of that tower. So what we've gone with is what resembles a bell tower. This is a site that is located within the parking lot of a church, so we thought it was fitting that you'd have a bell tower. It's not uncommon that a church might have a bell tower that looked very similar to this. Again, we were aware of additional concerns, so we did have a second meeting, and there we discussed some of the same issues, but ultimately what we decided to do after that meeting, at the request of neighbors and Ms. Powers and Mr. Highsmith, we went from a chain link fence to a solid wood fence completely surrounding the enclosure, and ultimately added a 5-foot landscape buffer on all 4 sides of the equipment compound. So because this is a bit of a unique issue, I think it is important to talk a little bit about the federal law that governs these sites. You have both a memo from me and a memo from the city attorney's office that details it. They largely agree with one another. The Telecommunication Act of 1996 is what governs the erection and placement of these sites. The federal government, when the cell tower explosion came online, saw fit to regulate and require minimal levels of service. And so with that, what the federal government has done is taken out a lot of the city's ability to regulate these in terms of the placement and site. And so what has transpired over years and years of litigation is essentially what is referred to as a 2-prong test. We are required to meet an initial burden showing that there is a gap in our coverage, either due to capacity or other. Once we do that, we have to prove that the site we have selected is the least intrusive means. And once we do that, there is a burden-shifting mechanism that kicks in, and it then shifts the burden to the city to rebut the scientific data that will be put forth here today. One of the issues worth addressing, when we met with the neighbors, they looked at the municipal code. When you look at the municipal code, the erection of a cell tower in R1 is permitted by right without the special permit process under a provision called the Residential District Waiver. That's a very specific set of criteria that you have to meet in order to be able to erect the pole, meaning all you have to do is go to the 8th floor, get your permit. You don't ever come before the Planning Commission or City Council. You have very large setbacks. Where you see the Residential District Waiver typically used is in emerging areas, typically out in the suburban areas of any city. This site at 16th and Penn certainly wouldn't qualify as that. This is one of the older parts of the city. It's fully urbanized and fully built out. You'd never find a spot within the core of the city like this that could meet those requirements for the Residential District Waiver. So in the absence of meeting those requirements, the process is set up in R1 to get a special permit. So what that means is it's a use contemplated within the R1 district, but it requires oversight by the Planning Commission and ultimately City Council. So that's why we're here today on a City Council. What you will hear from the speakers is that because the networks and the demand on cell phones has changed over the years, what they're seeing now is because of the data usage that we all enjoy, they're having capacity problems. Primarily, especially in an area like this where you've got the plaza emerging, the redevelopment of this neighborhood, you have an influx of people now in these areas that we haven't seen for years, and everybody uses their phone. A lot of people use phones that don't have landlines. A lot of people use phones rather than having internet service at their house, and so that increased demand has caused capacity issues. One of the other problems that creates is the search window is very small that these companies have to look for to find a site that is suitable. The means of last resort is coming before a city and asking to build a new tower. As you might imagine, it's extremely expensive to build these towers, so what these companies do first is they upgrade all their current infrastructure, and that's what you'll see in Exhibit F, the letter justifying what they've done. So they go and upgrade all their current towers in the area that they believe could potentially service the gap that they have here. If that doesn't work, they look for co-location opportunities to fill the gap that they have here. When those two fail, they are left with no other means but to find a site to erect a new tower. And so that's why we're here today, to get approval to erect a new tower. So with that, unless there's questions on that piece of it for me, I'm going to turn it over to Ramel, who is the RF engineer, to walk through some of the data that you have before you.
Good afternoon. My name is Romel Ilagan. I'm a senior radio frequency engineer working for T-Mobile, and I am in charge of the design and optimization of the Oklahoma market. And as early as 2006, actually year by year, how the network is behaving and how we are mitigating the what to do next on keeping up with the network, expected from the network. We go through this dimensioning and design process with our national and regional team, especially for what to upgrade and what to get the budget for. So in the course of all the design guideline, the new site build is the most expensive and the longest to deploy. So this is, as David had mentioned, this is our last option in our design guideline. So can you go to one page after this? We have in the we are usually working on 4th generation cell technology right now. And we still have working 2G and 3G. And we are harvesting the spectrum out of those to be able to use it into 4G. That's our first of the upgrades by harvesting the old technology to use the spectrum to the new technology. And we have done that for the Oklahoma market. The next is we use all this spectrum and upgrade the existing sites for LTE capacity. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in this particular site, As early as 2016, we are looking at upgrading the surrounding sites with additional LTE, and we have done that in 2016 and 2017. But the forecast for the area with the demand up to, we use marketing forecast from the national team on how the surrounding neighborhood grows in terms of usage. So this site, this area would still need a new site by forecast demand. And with all the surrounding sites already upgraded, that is why we need the new tower. One more slide, please. So there are two main guidelines on what to build in cellular technology. Number one is we need to cover the area, and number two is we need to keep the service of that area that we already covered. So it's either a design based on coverage or a design based on capacity. This particular site is based on capacity, and a congested network directly is perceived by the customer, the subscriber. If I'm watching Netflix and I'm buffering, then it's a service impacting. So that's, and we define a congested network based on two metrics. The chart on the left is the utilization, and we define a congested network if it's 70% utilized. The site surrounding this neighborhood is about 90% utilization, and the second congestion metric is the number of users for 5 megahertz should be 50 to be able to have your speed. And the three sites surrounding the area where we plan to mitigate the capacity is already meeting that line. So well before the 2019 forecast, we are already in that congestion status as the market grows. So the next three slides here are the three sectors where that area we are planning. If we are Exhibit B, looking at Exhibit B, so this is a prediction model. So we're using a prediction model on the coverage, and right now we really don't have a coverage hole in the area because it is a capacity design and it is for congestion. So this is a capacity side. And if you would look at four slides, please. One more slide. Okay, one more, please. This site is called OK 1472 in our network site naming, and the predicted boundary is exactly where what it is showing that it is exactly going to offload the three sectors that we had designed it for. And that's why it's important to have it in the area that we have specified. Do you have any questions?
I wish I did.
Sorry.
I can't come up with the one right now. I'm going to think about it, though.
So, very often in response to these kinds of applications, the things that we hear are, my cell service is just fine, we don't need this. And I would like for you to respond to that concern.
Absolutely. What you've seen transpire over the last 20 years through the federal circuits is denials by municipalities for various reasons. One of them is people showing up at hearings saying, I have T-Mobile or I have AT&T and I have perfect coverage. That exact issue was litigated, and I'm trying to find the case now, but what it says is cities can't base a denial on that. There'd have to be some sort of rebuttal of the scientific data. Anecdotal evidence by neighbors of cell coverage is not enough to justify the denial, because what is required is written substantial evidence in order to rebut what you just heard. And so that exact issue has been litigated. And it was thrown out by the court and said anecdotal evidence of neighbors of cell coverage is not enough to support a denial of the erection of a cell tower under the Federal Act.
So it's your position that in order for the city of Oklahoma City to deny an application for a cell tower like this based on capacity, they're going to have to provide scientific evidence to rebut what your engineer just said?
That's right. And in fairness, it's not just my position, but it's also the municipal councilor's opinion.
Is that
That's correct. We'd have to have some expert that would rebut their testimony.
Do we have one of those?
No.
Well, so then would your response be the same to the other thing we hear, which is, I don't have T-Mobile service, so why would I care about this?
Yes. And the reason being, under the Federal Act, these carriers are required to meet minimal level of service. Okay? So regardless of who's on their network or not, they have to meet certain standards. And so it's on them to provide for that level of service. And the only way they can do that sometimes is the erection of new towers to fill what the federal courts have determined to be a significant gap. And so the first chart she was going through with all the squiggly lines is what's showing, and I apologize, I'm sure that's not the scientific term, but that is what's showing the significant gap based upon the capacity.
The tower design that you proposed, the stealth design,
yes.
It looks like power, is that will you be the only carrier that occupies that, or will that be available for co-location if there are other carriers that need to co-locate?
Sure, great question. They were able to design this in a capacity that will allow for the future co-location. What you will notice is there's 3 white panels.
Right.
So each of those will be able to have a carrier within that white panel.
Okay, so in order, this is a quote, T-Mobile tower, but sure. AT&T, Sprint, somebody else that needed to eliminate congestion.
That's right.
In their area or capacity, not service, but
or any of it. I mean,
right. They would be able to co-locate there, so you'd get maybe a threefer ultimately.
Well, not just be able to, but frankly, they'd be required to.
That's right. If there's space available, they have to co-locate. That's one of the requirements.
The ordinance requires
before you erect a new tower.
That's right. And so that there would be 2 additional spots available for 2 additional carriers when and if they faced some sort of capacity
Similar
gap.
situation?
That's right.
Thanks.
So the third thing that we most frequently hear from people about this is that they're concerned about the electromagnetic frequency spillover from these kinds of facilities. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that.
Yeah, so that site or that point specifically has been litigated ad nauseum, and in your memo from your municipal counselor's office states at page 11, it's the substantive limitation number 3, and I quote, "No regulation based on basis of environmental effects of radio frequency emissions clause." So the government has specifically removed the ability to point to RF or health concerns as a basis, even if there was technical data to support it. That provision has been stripped out under the Act as nothing that can rebut to allow you to deny on that point.
So I guess the other, and this may be more of a question for your engineer, I don't know. The other thing that it seems to me most frequently I hear from people is whether there isn't some other way, some other means, some other technology available to address the question of either capacity or coverage or whatever it is that is the crux of the particular application.
Absolutely. And the case of New York versus Town of Clarkson specifically held, and this is the Second Circuit Court, it further explained that the town's preference for alternate technologies to close the service coverage gaps are also preempted because they interfere with the federal government's regulation of technical and operational aspects of wireless telecommunication technology, a field that is occupied by federal law. So the cities are preempted from pointing to alternative technologies as a means to close the gap.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions of Mr. Fox?
I have no questions.
A number of people signed up to speak.
And
so-
I do need to meet my second prong now, if you
Go ahead.
permit me. So the next prong we have to meet is the least intrusive means. And so with that, Mr. James Cardinal, who is the site acquisition specialist, will present. And if you turn to Exhibit E in your booklet, that will be the basis of his testimony.
Good afternoon. James Cardinal, Site Acquisition Specialist, Fortune Wireless, 6402 Corporate Drive, Indianapolis, Indiana. Fortune Wireless worked with the applicant for this project to acquire the site necessary for the tower subject to this application. And I start my process after the RF engineer has identified an area needed for a tower, as in the case with this subject. In this case, Exhibit E in your handout shows the location of the search ring that was provided by the RF engineer. If you want me to wait till he gets to that slide, I'll continue. It's this one right here. So as you can see here, the ring is small due to the urbanized area where the gap exists, the capacity gap. I identified 5 total sites as shown in this Exhibit E. Even though 4 of the sites are not within the ring, the red ring, I try to find as many sites as possible that may be immediately adjacent to the ring to present to the RF engineer to see if that could possibly work. I will now walk through each site we looked at as listed on Exhibit E and explain my analysis for each. So on all, you can leave it there. It's all on that exhibit.
Before you start, which one is the actual site?
The
primary
The
candidate?
only one inside the ring.
Primary candidate?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So on Alt 1, in analyzing this site, it was clear that the site lacked the space necessary to locate a tower based upon the current use of the property. The site was deemed not technically feasible to locate a tower on because of that. On Alt 2, similar to Alt 1, the site lacked the requisite space and was deemed not technically feasible. Alt 3, the site was eliminated due to RF and technical deficiency reasons. Alt 4, there was not enough space available at this site to be technically feasible, so the same as Alt 1 and 2. So finally, that takes us to the primary candidate, and this was the only site in our search that fit all the criteria necessary for location of the needed tower. The site falls within the ring provided by the RF engineer, and it has the space needed for the tower and the associated equipment. And if there's anything else that you guys would, any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
I want to just make sure I understand that you're saying, when you say there's not space available, you're talking about physically not enough.
With the primary candidate, they had a back parking lot that they weren't using, so that gave us the space to locate the 35 by 35 equipment compound. All of the other locations, other than the one that was deemed not technically feasible for RF reasons, they all used the parking lots, so there wasn't an area that they didn't use that we could put the compound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a couple brief things in closing, and I do want to walk through these photo sims so the commission can get a sense of what this will actually look like. Cindy, if you could turn to Exhibit C. What the photosim process allows you and the neighbors to do is to look at several vantage points throughout the neighborhood. There we go. And so what we'll do is just walk through them briefly. You'll see the next screen, you'll have the 7 points that we'll then see the comparison of what it looks like now and what it will look like after the erection of the tower. So we go to Location number 1, you'll see it as it would look today, and then if we go to the next image, you can see the tower in the background. You can see one of the 3 white panels that'll be there. And then as we move forward, again, location 2, and then location 2, you can see the top again of the top of the 3 panels, and then same thing with 3. As we move forward, you can see now 2, location 4. There you can see all 3. Location 5, which is going to allow you to see, because this is shot from in the lot that we're going to be on. So here you can see the tower, you can see the fence, and you can see the 5 foot of landscaping that'll surround this on all 4 sides. I understand that a lot of times that these types of cases do cause some concern. We did try our best to hear the concerns of the neighbors, modify what we were doing as best we could to both fill our gap, but also make this more aesthetically pleasing to the neighbors. And I do, for purposes of the record, to your question about people that have coverage, it comes from the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas. It's 546 Federal 3rd at 1308. And its anecdotal evidence of service quality in the area to be served by the proposed facility is not substantial evidence of the lack of a significant gap in service coverage or capacity. And so that, just to that point, that specific point was dealt with previously. So with that concludes our evidence. We believe we have met the burden that we were required to meet under the Telecommunication Act of 1996. Be happy to answer any questions.
Will this application now require a waiver by the city?
No. This is separate and apart. The waiver from the city is only if you are in an area that has, it's an emerging area where you have 300 feet of separation between any use. It is unlikely, if not impossible, to ever find in the urbanized core of any city that you'd have the separation necessary to go under the waiver provisions in the code. So the alternative is the special permit application.
And it's an alternative process. If they were eligible for the waiver, then we wouldn't see it. So it's...
That's right. And to that point, one of the exhibits you have in here are the kind of site construction. And what you see in Exhibit D at Bates number 5, the tower itself to the nearest house is 82 feet 11 inches. The tower itself to the closest structure, which is a garage to the west of us, is 61 feet 6 inches. Now certainly the compound and the fence and the landscaping are closer, but the center point of the tower, those are the distances I just gave you.
Commissioners, do we have any more questions of Mr. Box, or shall we hear from those who have signed up? I think so.
Thank you.
I have here, I bothered to count them and I've lost my count, but I have a number of people signed up to speak. Normally we do ask groups to appoint a spokesperson, but if there are other people who want to speak in addition and have something new or different to add, we'll be happy to hear from them. Mr. Elliott, will you come give us your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Rob Elliott. My home is at 2215 Northwest 17th Street. And yes, Madam Chairwoman, we do have a few people here ready to speak. I don't know, we'll try and keep our remarks as brief as possible and cover the things that we need to cover.
Would you like to stand and show us who's here? Thank you.
Well, after you get a letter from the city and it's not the water bill, you have a little bit of attention to pay. And we did. We got the notice of special application. Neighbors talked and visited the site, began to wonder what was going on. We had noticed the church and the school activity had been dwindling over the years, but had never been contacted about the programs or plans for the property. After our initial adverse reaction, we realized we needed to learn more about the problem and the process. So we studied the zoning code, we studied the Oklahoma City plan, we studied the actual use of the property, and we tried to figure out the federal legislation that David had included in his memo, all in order to voice our present objections to the proposal. We also had some ideas that could be solutions for this in future cell tower proposals. As David said, we met a couple of times, and we really thank David and the applicant team for their attention and the information regarding this application. We didn't understand one thing either. To that point, and as you brought to light, the city doesn't have anybody that can evaluate the proposal and the science either. And we think that's a significant part of what could happen to evaluate a proposal like this. The application explains that there's a significant gap in T-Mobile service. Some charts, graphs, maps are presented in the application. We admit we don't know the absolute science and technical issues that are presented, but we understand the city doesn't either. In this situation, there's no verification or substantiation of the need, only the applicant's statement. These assertions need to be corroborated to justify an action like a special permit in a residential area. I'll come back to this. We looked at the zoning code. Well, you guys are the experts on zoning code. Applicant confirms that they don't meet the requirements for a conditional use. They concede they don't meet the requirements for the special waiver of a residential district use. But the most onerous factor here is being ignored in this request for special permit is the separation of 300 feet from a residential use. There are 20 houses within 300 feet of the proposed tower. One house, and we're probably in the same range of feet, we measured 94 feet to Ted and Lissa's house. They have a garage apartment, has living quarters, that'll be 70 feet from the tower. This is much like the map in your packet that's indicating the red dot is the tower on the church property. It indicates its location regarding other surrounding residential homes and uses. So we understood that and looked at that. Thank you, David. Thank you, sir. And as David had mentioned, we looked at the plans prepared by the group that indicated on their site what their plans were. Some of our meetings, and we recognized that they have made accommodation to try and make a stealth tower. Whether it looks like a bell tower or not, they're calling it bell tower, okay. But they've made accommodation on a site-proof screen for the fence, which is helpful. They've made accommodation for landscaping, I think, which is required by the code. At our last meeting, there was conversation about access to the actual tower compound itself. And I think the determination at that point, the access would be through the church parking lot. This drawing indicates that there's a driveway that goes to the south from the compound that connects to 16th Street. And it shows maybe a gate. We don't know if there are additional fences or how that all may work eventually. Those things could probably be worked out in the permitting process. Special permit requires direct access to a street. So perhaps the idea of accessing from the church parking lot may or may not be feasible or allowable. So, I mean, we get the idea. It's a cell tower with a fence around it. Some specific things that would need to be worked out in whatever proposal that may be finally accepted. One thing we noticed also was the engineering group that's prepared, I think, the drawings and the site exhibits is not listed on the state registered and licensed survey group. So that may be an issue that needs to be resolved. So we mentioned that there's 20 houses within the 300-foot radius from the tower. There are 68 properties within your 300-foot notification boundary. This is a map indicating those properties, and I'm sorry you can't see the actual radius from the property because it's a very light line. The colors in red are properties in the area of protest. The yellow dot indicates it's an owner-occupied property. Of the 68 properties in the 300-foot notification boundary, there are 37 that have protested, and we have 60 letters of protest to submit today. By all accounts, the tower use would be incompatible with the residential district. Special permit asks that you put aside the zoning and planning criteria to satisfy a special interest at the expense of the neighborhood. We looked at the comprehensive plan. The plan's pretty new, I think, and it's really long. But some of the bullets we picked up are really supportive of neighborhoods. Bullet, community appearance is important. The scale and materials of the urban neighborhoods enhance the fabric of the city. We state that the cell tower design that you saw today is foreign to the scale and vibrancy of the traditional neighborhood character. Bullet, revitalize and stabilize urban neighborhoods as a goal. Bullet, upgrade urban design and development standards. Bullet, improve community appearance. Bullet, foster stable, attractive neighborhoods and community districts. Those are all items from the comprehensive plan. The staff report concerning the special permit says the comprehensive plan does not specifically address telecommunication towers. Perhaps it should, and now would be the opportune time to study this matter, as the implementation of this cell tower would certainly not conform to or enhance the comprehensive plan. Fourth, we tried to understand what's going on the property. As mentioned, the Sunday traffic and school traffic has diminished noticeably. We're not sure what activities are present at the property now. Efforts to have a dialogue with the church leaders or others associated with the property have gone unanswered. But we can readily see that the installation of a cell tower under the lease agreement would be nothing more than a business enterprise on the property, a use that's not compatible or zoned for in a residential district. In effect, the special permit will allow commercial use in the R1 residential district. The feds, David has outlined certainly the contents of his memo. We also had a privilege of reviewing the municipal councilor's memo to the council and planning commission also. We didn't hire a lawyer, but our investigation to date shows evidence that reinforces the standard that municipalities have the authority and duty to determine matters of land use. Nowhere in the federal act does it talk about a gap capacity. The intent of the legislation in 1996 was to make sure that cell tower companies could come into a community and offer service. It doesn't talk about quality of service. It talks about service being available. Well, we've met that. We have service. The capacity gap is not our problem. It's not the community's problem. It's a problem that can be overcome with technology. And finally, we'd like to be part of a solution. Some of the ideas that we would like to put forward is Oklahoma City should investigate this and have foresight to come up with a creative solution, expecting technology that will outpace what the methods of previous old installations will soon render obsolete. Small cell towers are the coming technology. Looking at the papers and listening to the radio and TV this week, 5G is coming. Other cities are introducing small towers in their urban areas to satisfy this capacity gap. Let's do that. Let's be proactive about offering 5G to our citizens. If we need taller towers, great. There are some locations that we think could be suitable. We mentioned city medians as one. There's 2 medians in this area that could be looked at to serve this gap area. The tower is only about 8 feet wide, 100 feet tall. That's about from where Chairman Powers sits to about the back wall. That's about how far it will be from a home. It will be, the base will be about the size of a Volkswagen. It will probably be about 5 times taller than the ceiling. Medians is one. Another possible location for us to look at is school sites. The way schools have been developed around the city, the spacing to serve the community, the spacing is correct. There's plenty of open space around schools, and the schools could also benefit from the income. In closing, we ask that this be viewed not just as the Las Vegas neighborhood protesting a cell tower, but an issue that may have wide-ranging effects in the community that needs detailed evaluation. As the comprehensive plan is undergoing further review, this is an opportune time to enact this evaluation. With regard to this specific application for a special permit, I hope you'll agree that this proposed cell tower is not in conformance with the zoning code, is not a compatible use for a residential neighborhood, and does not meet the standards for a special use permit. I'd like to also introduce Lissa McLaughlin, who is a neighbor very close to the tower.
Good afternoon. I'm Lissa McLaughlin.
Ted McLaughlin, 2131 Northwest 16th.
I do have, can I give this to you, or I've got some pictures of my home. You can see that actually is a shadow. This is my premiere speech here. Yes, you can see the picture on top is actually from my side porch. No, actually, it's from my sitting room window, I believe. And you can see the peak of my home. That's how close in the shadow there you can see. The other picture is I was standing just to the left.
I think this one goes with this
of the
one.
truck.
Yes.
The truck is sitting where the tower will be built. And I stood we measured it, Ted and I measured it with a tape measure, and we stood where the fence would be. So that's how close the edge of the fence will be to my property. So I just wrote a few notes because honestly, I'd sound like Elmer Fudd if I tried to just say it. So we have lived in our home for over 40 years, and I've been coming to this home since I was born. My grandparents lived in it from 1926 until we moved in 1978. Ted also grew up in the area. He grew up on 18th Street in Gatewood. This is our home and our heart. We are actually devastated by this proposal. Our home is within 30 feet. And we measured it from the edge of where the fence is going to be of this tower and its compound. We will literally live in its shadow, and our house is 3 stories tall. When asked why it had to be so close to our home while being as far as possible, and you can see how far it is from the applicant's buildings, David Box replied that it was inconvenient for them to put it anywhere but where they are asking to put it. Ted and I are both retired, and we're living on a fixed income. Our home is our greatest asset. We have remained in this neighborhood by choice. We have watched over the years many changes as people moved away from this area. We wanted our children to feel the heritage and experience living in a community like this one. The deep history, the awesome architecture, and the diversity of people living here. It is so rich in individuality. lost my point. We have lived through absentee landlords, obnoxious renters, very obnoxious renters, falling property values as people continued to move out. They weren't moving in. We have watched with delight as the Plaza District has grown from a dangerous, blighted area to the vibrant place it has become. This has taken a lot of hard work and effort from many individuals, organizations, and strong support from our city. Witness also the support and the resulting growth in the Classen 10 Penn neighborhood. Took a lot of work to bring that back. New life is being breathed into this once neglected neighborhood. 100-year-old homes are being brought back to life. We are finally seeing our property values appreciate as pride in ownership is becoming the new normal. We believe this proposal is a step backwards, not forwards. At this point, the only place we can turn is to our city and its codes, meant to protect and strengthen our neighborhoods. That these protective codes can be completely overridden by a piece of paper is just so wrong. If we can't get help from our city, where can we turn? I cannot believe that Congress intended anything like this when they enacted the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Everyone involved in this proposal stands to make a substantial income, except for us and our neighbors, the ones who will suffer the greatest impact, and we will be the losers. We were only considered obstacles to overcome as this plan was conceived, planned, and presented. We learned of it only after we received notice of the permit request. Their only effort to engage us, the neighbors, was after we pushed back. There are many reasons EcoSite and T-Mobile want a tower of this magnitude. That it is essential, I question. Technology is moving fast, and it is impractical to have 100-foot towers everywhere. Cell service is less than optimal. This is why cell technology is moving so fast. With 5G technology, we can download a high-def movie in just a matter of seconds. We will realistically be relying on smaller micro towers for the future. We'll also be relying more on DAS installations in buildings, and satellite. Satellite technology is right around the corner. We were told this lease for this tower is for 30 years. Some of us in this room won't even be around. I probably won't even be here. This tower will still be standing. This will impact this neighborhood for a long, long time. Once in, what is to stop them from putting up another tower? The so-called twin tower effect. We believe this setting is a precedent. What protection will any neighborhood in the city have against this encroachment? We fully support wireless telecommunication infrastructure in the city, but through careful planning, diligent review, and judicial approval process of wireless services for our residents. We're not here to vilify anyone. We are seeking to protect our home and property, the integrity and aesthetics, and the continual growth of our neighborhood. This situation is simply not right, and it is definitely not the least intrusive. I want to thank you all for your time, and I also want to thank Asa and Janice for coming to our meetings.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions? No? Thank you. I have, I'll say very gingerly, a number of people who are signed up to speak. If you have something different or additional that you want to share with us, this is your chance. No? Mr. Box, one of the comments, I'm sorry.
Could I have a minute, please?
Sure, of course.
I realize that
You'll have to come down, please. Give us your name and address.
Sebastian Davis,
Come to the microphone.
2215 Northwest 18th Street.
Try again.
Sebastian Davis, 2215 Northwest 18th Street. And I realize that looking at having to review each of these with an RTF expert to do research on coverage within the city could be an expensive proposition. I just wanted to suggest that you look at OSU or the University of Oklahoma with respect to students within the appropriate department supervised by the appropriate faculty on a contractual basis to look at issues like this, and not necessarily to redo the whole study, but basically to check their methodology with respect to the data they had available to see whether it's actually leads them to the decision that they made. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the comments that Mr. Elliott made that kind of struck me was that there is no substantiation or verification of the technical information regarding the need and so forth. And while I think that that statement is almost undeniably true with respect to the city,
That's right.
we simply do not have that capability or expertise, my question to you is whether there's any verification of that information that we should know about.
It's their data, certainly. And it may feel like an awkward position for a city to be in when you have very technical data. I think Commissioner Cravens probably said it best when he was trying to find a question.
My question is, does anyone else verify it?
Well, it's on the city to do it. And if you'll remember back in 2012, we had a similar case in your ward.
So, for instance, the FCC, there's no other regulatory review of this information at all?
Well, the FCC certainly governs all of this, but are you asking, does the FCC literally take Romel's data that we presented and confirm it prior to submitting?
Well, not particularly, but do they? I mean, I don't know.
No, they don't.
How does that process work?
I mean, the data is what it is. Their network is constantly being monitored, and their data, as reflected in the maps that we provide, is what their data reflects. I mean, I can assure you companies aren't out there building multi-million-dollar towers just because they're looking for something to do on a Thursday afternoon. They're required to meet certain, coverage criteria. And what the city did in 2012 was put out an RFP for this specific reason, because that neighborhood group made the same claims. So the city wanted to see if they could find a way to be in a position to check the data, or what the Federal Act says is rebut it if they deem it inconclusive or incorrect. And to my knowledge, and Mr. Brummett might correct me, I don't know that there were responses, or if there were responses, I'm not sure what the costs were, but ultimately the city, I believe, declined to do anything. But
that's correct. Okay. We had advised at that time that in order to evaluate an application, particularly if we're going to deny, we have to have specific technical advice from an expert in the field to rebut the applicant's contentions and the evidence presented by their experts. And for whatever reason, we declined to go through with that.
And the fear was in 2012 that there was going to be this, this rush, and it was going to set a precedent. To my knowledge, this is the next one that's come online that has generated a significant amount of interest. And so, there's been a 6-year gap with no activity, which I suspect is why the city didn't want to expend a lot of funds on a problem that was not likely to reoccur often.
Thank you. Commissioners?
I have a question for Mr. Elliott. You alluded to the fact of new and improved technologies that would surpass the need for towers, smaller, more technologically advanced equipment. Can you provide any further information in that regard?
Not that I would have confidence in, Ms. Coffey. I certainly don't know the wireless field.
Okay.
But because of its advent, I think that it behooves us to be able to know more. I can only know that what I can read online, especially after being thrust in a get smarter position, that the DAS antennas, distributed antenna systems, the small cells that are mounted on the top of urban light poles, many urban centers are going to that. I think it was yesterday an announcement was made that it may be the Sprint company who will start 5G service in this same fashion, small cell, in urbanized areas, Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C. There may be some others that I'm not remembering or misstating even. But that the cell companies are figuring it out, technologically wise. They're all competing, and they're getting better. They're getting smarter. They're getting better. They're getting better for us. But I don't know the specific science, ma'am.
That was the point of one of my questions earlier. It's my understanding that the availability of alternative technology is not a sufficient basis for us upon which to deny these kinds of applications.
I think to that point, Ms. Powers, is that part of the Federal Communications Act, I think, and Counselor will tell us better, and Mr. Box will weigh in too, but I think that they recognize they want to advance newest technology as part of the intent of the Act.
And I'm sure that's true, and wouldn't we all? I mean, it'd be lovely if we could take down all these telephone poles we have, but...
And so to that point, the problem with the small cell technology, what Romel will tell you is it wouldn't work here. Where it works is in a highly densified urban area, like a New York, a Chicago, a D.C. It wouldn't work here. But as Ms. Powers mentioned, I mean, the FCC preempts under the Act a city from looking at alternative technologies. It is not a basis by, even if it was viable, it's not a basis by which a city can deny an application. The city is explicitly preempted on that point.
Thank you.
Unless anybody else has any questions or there's more comments from the audience, with this being my ward, I will attempt to make a motion. But I did want to say first, I think based on what I understand of past cases, this has been an issue before. It's extremely hard to rule on. I have a lot of sympathy for the neighborhood. We had a couple meetings, and we've, I think, made some good ground. In the end, the Planning Commission's in a tough spot in these, and as both Councilor Box and our own legal counsel have shown, our hands are mostly tied. I do think that this is an issue that we need to continue to consider and find a better answer for in the future. Today, however, I am going to make a motion to recommend approval of this item. I think the applicant has gone a long way towards improving the initial application, and I think it's worth continual conversation. However, today I make a motion to approve the application.
I think I also want to just comment that I very much appreciate all of the time and effort that the neighbors have put into this. I think, although it may not feel this way to you, that we have done what we can do in encouraging the applicant to landscape the site and to put up a stealth tower instead of a standard pole. And I think beyond that is simply beyond our authority. It's simply beyond our ability. So I have a motion and a second to recommend approval. Is that what we're doing? Let's go to City Council. We're recommending approval of the special permit. If you cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
And it is recommended for approval.
Item 18 is SPUD 967 to rezone 8324 Campbellwood Drive from C3 to SPUD 967.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm going to recuse myself from this case.
Okay. And,
All right.
oh,
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Chris Cheatwood, who is also here with us today. I want to start by thanking Commissioner Hensley for meeting us out on site last Friday. My client bought this site several years ago. He has been operating an automotive impound yard. He's been operating that for 4 or 5 years. This site is a bit of a unique site in that it's zoned straight C3 right now. Cindy, if you can go back to the zoning map. And it sits in a very awkward spot for it to ever be realized as some sort of commercial development. If you look at the aerial, it's it's set back off Northwest Highway. It really fronts on Candlewood Drive. Its southern boundary is the back of house for the automotive repair shop and the restaurant. So it shares a fence line with the dumpsters and the grease traps of those restaurants. And so the idea that it would ever be developed meaningful under C3 is probably not likely. And so my client has been operating for several years, unaware that he wasn't zoned correctly. This site has historically always been some sort of automotive use, whether it was a car wash or a tire and lube shop. So what we have filed is an SPUD to go from C3 to the SPUD that would only allow on this site the uses that my client is doing. When we were out there with Commissioner Hensley, he asked us to do a few things that we agreed to. We're going to increase our landscaping by 10%. My client already has an 8-foot stockade fence on the east. There's a 6-foot stockade fence on the north. Currently, he has a 6-foot stockade fence on the south. Where he has problems is on that south, because he shares that fence line with the restaurants, the automotive shop. When people break into his facility, it's there. They kick out slats and they enter. So what he is proposing and what we have put into our PUD is the requirement that that south fence line be 8-foot metal fence. It'll look more attractive. It'll provide more security for him in the neighborhood. And additionally, all the fences that faced west, those fences that would be viewable from the Candlewood Drive also would be the 8-foot metal fence. The dumpster is currently on the outside of the fence. We have agreed through the SPUD that dumpster has to go on the other side of the fence and be enclosed and not viewable. He has some cars that sit out there during the day, frankly, for a safety procedure so that people don't drive by, think it's abandoned if he's not there, and break in. And so what we agreed to do is there won't be any storage of cars on the outside of the fence overnight. So during the day, he can put those cars there. Overnight, he'll have to put them back behind that 8-foot metal fence. So with that, we believe we have done everything we can to make this site appropriate for the area, given the constraints it has based upon what it abuts and is surrounded by. We think it is in keeping with what you've got when you consider you've got an automotive type use to the west. You also have an automotive repair shop to the south. There's no written protest that I'm aware of, and we do agree with the 2 technical evaluations that are contained within your staff report.
David, the only thing, one thing, I know we talked about lighting, but especially on the north side, if Chris could direct those lights a little more down into the property, that would be, I know that you got to meet that part. On the south side, I think it's certainly less of an issue, except as maybe it gets along the east back toward the residential. This is, behind this property, there is, especially to the east, to the east, there's a kind of a gap between that and the abutting residential. And, the use, with the addition of the metal fence, which I think will help Chris, for one thing, part of the problem with the site has been the restaurant use and people parking on the restaurant side property, which causes the bad day, that Chris's use to look bad with their taxi cabs and stuff like that sat out there, and they most primarily parked on that side of the place. So it's a challenging piece of property. It's been, this will improve it, believe it, with what the proposed fence, et cetera, will make it look better for the neighborhood, move the dumpster inside and screen along the south. And I think that, again, nobody's contacted me about this property. I think his proposed use is, it's actually quieter perhaps than some of the other uses that may be there. So It may not appear it, but it's definitely an upgrade to what's been there for the last few years and what is going on now. So I endorse the application for what it is.
Let me ask, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item? Then I'll ask, is that a motion, Mr. Hanson?
I'll move approval, and we have an amended SPUD that has contained the amendments that we spoke on with regard to the adjusting the sign, screening the dumpsters, and then the location of the 8-foot metal fence, kind of an opaque color on the south and on the west side.
Facing.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of SPUD 967 as amended. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is recommended for approval.
Okay. Item number 19 is PUD 1672 to rezone 3201 Mosley Road from AA, PUD 1419, and PUD 1534 to PUD 1672.
Get her cleaned up.
Good afternoon. Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. And also with me is Mr. Peter Schultz, who is the Senior District Manager for Waste Management, and Jonathan Queen, who is the engineer with Weaver Consultants, Keith Gibson from my office, and also Mr. Dennis Box from my office, making an appearance today. This is an application to plan for and allow the continued growth of this waste management facility located off of 23rd and Sooner. The opportunity to buy what you see on your screen as those two ponds came forward, and my client was able to buy them. So what they're going to do is, as part of this PUD, allow for the expansion of the landfill into that northern pond. It's worth noting that the southern pond that's right there on the street frontage along Sooner and 23rd will remain. It is not part of the plan here. What this application will do is buy Waste Management 27 years of additional life at this landfill. This landfill is particularly well located based upon what's surrounded. If you look to the north of 36th Street, it's the old Oklahoma City landfill. To the west is the river. To the east is another landfill, railroad tracks in the city of Midwest City. And when you look south, there's not a lot of residential. So unlike some of the other landfills that we have in this city, this one doesn't have a significant residential population surrounding it. So I'm not aware of any protest. I do want to thank everybody that was able to visit with us and take the time out of their schedule to visit on this site, particularly Dr. Cooper. This is in his ward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there are TEs. They're the standard TE about engineering requirements, and we do agree with that. Ms. Powers, you did ask the question of me about the reclamation plan. The plan for that would be for this to be a wildlife habitat.
And is that documented? Do we know that will happen? Do we have any certainty of that?
Yes, my name's Peter Schultz, address 3201 Mosley Road. Yes, it is documented with the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality that we have to maintain and reclaim this facility when we're finished using it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here today who wants to be heard on this matter? Commissioners who have comments, questions, concerns?
Yes, Janice, I would like to thank Mr. Box and for Waste Management coming and answering some significant questions that I thought was really important, and then also sending me additional information from that meeting. And so given where this is located and everything related to it, it was an industrial sand pit. It's not really just a pond like, you would think. This is industrial sand pit that has been left behind, and so this will help to kind of fill that in and then to give it more life in the city. And based upon what information we have on the other landfills, then this is reasonable. And so for that, I move for adoption.
Second. I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 19. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is recommended
Thank you.
for approval.
Item 20 is SPUD 1039 to rezone 1006 Northeast 17th Street from R2 to SPUD 1039.
Good afternoon, Troy Humphrey with Land Run Commercial Real Estate Advisors, 114 Northwest 6th Street in Oklahoma City, here on behalf of the applicant, SGK Properties, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Troy Humphrey.
Tell us what it is you're asking us for.
So this property is currently, well, it's a former church. The church and the organization has since relocated, so basically it's a vacant building. The base zoning is R2, and we are asking to rezone it to an Office 2 use, which would permit the potential buyer, who intends to be the owner-occupant, to relocate their business into this facility, and we need that approval to do so.
Did you say you're in agreement with the technical evaluation?
Yes, we are.
There is somebody else here who wants to be heard on this. I don't have to ask. Do we have any questions of Mr. Humphrey before? No? Is it Danta Robinson? Did you want to be heard today? No? Okay. Commissioners?
I've had an opportunity to meet with the applicant and really to work through the sign issue, and so we're good as far as that. The usages on this, based on its location, it's really a fine facility already, and so they're really giving us some excellent upgrades, and I think it's going to work out to be an excellent project, the way a project should go. And so with that, move for adoption.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 20. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much.
Item 21 is SPUD 1041 to rezone 3445 Northwest 20th Street from R1 and the Linwood Place Urban Conservation District to SPUD 1041.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Parker. I'm a member of this congregation and deacon at 3440 Northwest 21st Street. And we're here in regards to this SPUD so that we have a growing congregation, and we own the 3 properties that are within this SPUD, and we're seeking approval for the SPUD so that we can expand parking to the south to the lot that's on the application, 3445 Northwest 20th.
Is there anybody signed up? Are there any questions?
I actually do have someone signed up to speak. Have you met with your neighbor there to the east?
We have, that's correct, yes. And in fact, we made a presentation to Linwood Neighborhood Association a few months ago to let them know what is going on, showed them drawings and all.
Thank you. Is John Milner here? Did you want to be heard? Yes. Would you come forward, please? Give us your name and address for the record.
Yeah, John Milner. I'm at 3408 Northwest 19th Street. I'm a resident of Linwood. I am also president of Linwood Neighbor Association. I do want to say, I want to verify they did come to a general meeting. They met, they presented it. I have spoken to one of the applicants several times. They've answered questions. They've been great to work with. I do want to, I hope I can ask a question directed towards them. I just want to make sure.
Ask me.
Ask you just to verify with them that there was something in here about lighting. I'm just I'm unclear what kind of lighting is going to be in that parking lot, though.
Okay.
So I think one of them might have to get up and answer that.
Would you come forward, please, and tell us what is your lighting plan?
We are going to provide lighting, but it has not been selected yet. We haven't continued the design process beyond trying to establish that which is required for the SPUD, since we're just seeking approval for the general idea of getting the combination of all these lots and to allow the parking lot, we would, of course, select one that works for, has a proper cutoff and all of this, but it has not been selected yet.
A lot of times when we see parking lots like this that are so close, and especially in these closer in neighborhoods, and they're so close to the residential properties next to them, we sometimes request that lighting be brought down to the level of the eaves of the houses, so that it's not more than would be, the lighting from a house next door, basically.
Right.
Rather than have them up on 14-foot standards or something like that.
Understood, yes.
Is that something that you think you could comply with?
100% we would do that.
Okay.
In the sonic feature, where it is directed into...
Well, the city's codes will require that the lighting be directed onto the side, and that you do what you need to do to minimize spillover and so forth. So that's a given.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Mr. Milner, did that answer your question? Okay. Commissioners?
Really excited to hear about a growing congregation.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I was thinking the same thing.
Thank you. And, I'm here with the elders of the congregation as well, Alan Bailey and Dwayne Cutter, if you have any questions. But we're also excited about the growth of our congregation.
Yeah, that's wonderful, in these close-in neighborhoods.
I recommend approval to the city council.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 21. Would you cast your votes, please? It is recommended for approval.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck.
Item 22 is withdrawn. Item 23 is SPUD 1043 to rezone 901 North Villa from I-2 to SPUD 1043.
Is the applicant present? I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be funny.
No, you're all right. I was a little slow. It's okay. For purposes of the record, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a zoning application that would allow a school to be built. This is an area that, along General Pershing, has seen an enormous transformation over the last 5 to 10 years. Wonderful new developments, wonderful new infrastructure being put in place. So this site, like I said, would be built as a school. When we first filed the application, staff had some concerns with how we plan to handle access and handle drop-off and pickup of students. So what we have said, and we're fine with, I believe traffic put some comments in there, all of our pickup and drop-off will be accomplished through shared drives off of General Pershing rather than Villa. There will be no access to Villa from this site. You can see a little panhandle shape that goes out to Villa. That's just what we're buying. There will be no access point there. That was their other concern based upon its proximity to the railroad at that point.
But didn't I understand that there is shared access through an adjacent site that ultimately goes out onto
Yes.
Okay.
But in the SPUD, we put in the drop-off and dismissal, and the queuing has to occur through the General Pershing rather than Villa. But certainly Villa, when it's non-drop-off and non-peak time, we will share access through the site to our east, and there will be an access point onto Villa. So with that, we do agree with the TEs. Be happy to answer any questions.
And the only question I had about this, and staff seemed to be fairly comfortable with it, is just that issue of carpool. Just that there is
That's right.
that there is enough and more than enough capacity on site to handle whatever traffic, and that there's a smooth way to move it, and that the kids are not cutting across it, and
Yep.
all that stuff.
Yeah, we had a meeting with Ms. Welch from Planning and Mr. McCubbin from Traffic on that point, and it was his suggestion as to the language about the dismissal and drop-off and pickup having to come from General Pershing, which we agree to.
Okay. That's not exactly what I was saying, but I want to make sure there's enough room on site.
Oh, sure,
For
yeah.
that to be
And there is. When you look on site, once they come up the shared drive, they'll circle around within the site in that shared parking area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter? Commissioners, comments, questions, concerns, motions?
Well, with this being in, did you have a question?
I don't know, is it a charter school or?
Positive Tomorrows is specifically a service for homeless.
Okay.
And I'm not sure on their total services, but I know we've got some representatives here that might want to speak to it.
I didn't know whether it was okay for us to say that out loud.
My name is Susan Ogle. My address would be 1901 North Douglas. I would, we actually don't have that much traffic that's involved. We go and pick up all the children, we bring them back, they'll drop off in a bus. Right now, out of 70 kids, we probably have 2 parents that are pick up and drop off. I've never seen more than 1 car in front of our building at a time. So anyway, this is going to allow us to, however, to double the number of children that we serve, to be able to move to this property, and it's going to be a great opportunity for us to do even more in the community. Any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I think it's an outstanding project and service, and I, with that enthusiasm, would make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 23. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you.
I will say that I did some student teaching at Positive Tomorrows years and years and years ago, and I've been looking for a better site for you ever since, and this is better than any one I ever found, so.
Item 24 is C-6972, the final plat of the Grove, Phase 11.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. With me today is the applicant, Mr. Matt Austin, who is the president of Caliber Development Company, and Tim Johnson, who is the civil engineer for the project. After these were filed, we got word that there were some concerns raised by the neighbors. So we did have a neighborhood meeting last Thursday night in which the civil engineer was there, myself, and the Caliber Development team. Most of the frustration was aimed at the Deer Creek School District, but the representatives that was there from the school district was able to help out a little bit by letting them know that there were 2 new schools planned that would open in the fall of 2020 to service this area. And then we were able to explain that with these plats coming online, it's likely to be 18 months, best case scenario, before the first house was occupied. It's probably worth going back and discussing a little bit about this project. This was a PUD that was approved back in 2005, and it was 640 acres. The odds that you could get a 640-acre PUD approved today, not very great. And the reason being is because they changed, and it never looks like what it was sold as that day. What you're looking at here is a master development plan map that essentially mirrors what was approved in 2005. This development has developed at a remarkable pace. This developer went and spent a significant amount of money at the outset for wonderful amenities, donated land to the Deer Creek School District that they built an elementary school that has really fueled this development. So what you have are 2 significant clubhouses. You've got clubhouse 1 that has a nice clubhouse, a sizable pool, basketball court, workout facility. Then they doubled it, and they did a second clubhouse. And then what you can see throughout this thing, you've got soccer fields, treehouse parks, pocket parks. You've got a tremendous amount of common area that they've been able to utilize for true amenities that the neighborhood can use and enjoy. And so what they've been left with is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in the state for the last 3 years. I don't know if any neighbors are here. It was our goal to have that meeting and to be able to ease any concerns they had with this development. Again, this is just a continuation of what has been marching forward since that day in 2005, almost in identical fashion. So this is the final plat for Phase 11. It conforms to the preliminary plat. We do agree with the TEs and be happy to answer any questions you have.
Second.
I'm sorry, I have a motion and a second to approve the final plat of Grove, Phase 11. Item number 24, would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
And item 25 is C6973. It's the final plat of the Grove, Phase 12.
Again, for the record, David Box. Address hasn't changed. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
This is a companion item to item 24. If there's no discussion on it, I'd move approval of final plat for the Grove, Phase 12.
Second.
Is there anyone present who wants to be heard on this item? If not, I've got a motion and a second to approve final plat of the Grove, Phase 12. Item number 25, would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
And item 26 is C6971, the final plat of the Grove, Phase 13.
Again, for the record, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant.
An additional companion item, I would move approval of the final plat of the Grove, Phase 13.
Second.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this item? If not, I've got a motion and a second to approve the final plat of the Grove, Phase 13. Item number 26, would you cast your votes, please? Not once, not one out of 3 times.
Item 27 is PUD 1669 to rezone 9201 West Britton Road from R1 to PUD 1669.
Is the applicant present?
I was forced to withdraw for various reasons I'd be happy to get into.
We didn't want to hear about that.
I'd be happy to do a service for my former client. Eric Groves has taken over representation of this. Bill Collins represents Mr. Claude Seipert and the neighbors that he has gathered on this case. Eric is out of town today, requested a continuance because he's out of state that I'm guessing that Bill and his neighbors are okay with. I'd be happy to take 5 green lights back to Eric, but probably best that it gets continued.
Mr. Chambliss, do we know anything about a continuance request? Shall we just pass it 2 weeks then? Or until the next meeting, which is when? So do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to continue PUD 1669 to the March 22nd meeting. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue item number 27 until March 22nd. Would you cast your votes, please? Did I ask if anybody else wanted to be heard on this matter? No? Okay. It is continued.
Item 28 is SPUD 1040 to rezone 1339 Northwest First Street from I-1 to SPUD 1040.
Could you give us
My
your name
name
and
is Charlie
address?
Allen Engineering, address is 1601 Southwest 89th Street. I was going to try to make something funny that I'm not David Box. Anyway, a little history on this property. The owners are actually here. The Leons are the owners of the property. Purchased the property about 5 years ago. What it is, it's industrial property. They own property to the north of this. It's zoned I-2. Thought they were buying similar property. Unfortunately, this is zoned I-1. Built a fence around the property, put in a gravel lot, been using it for almost 5 years as a storage yard. A few months ago, got a citation for not complying with the proper zoning. So they've hired me to submit for the SPUD. In the SPUD, what we were trying to do is work with what they've already built, the existing 6-foot fence around the property. There's residential to the east and some residential to the north. What we'd like to do, and it doesn't comply with zoning requirements as far as a buffer and so forth, is on the north and east sides, we'd like to build a site-proof fence on the inside of the existing chain link fence, provide a 10-foot buffer with landscaping. On the
south and west sides, we'd like to put trees along the right-of-way and leave the existing 6-foot fence. This is kind of a little rough neighborhood, I guess, and instead of having site-proof fencing on the street frontage, we'd like to have that visible so any police passing by can actually see into the property. If you've been by this area, there are people that have tents to the north of this property and live there. There's gangs, there's a lot of graffiti on the walls and so forth. We'd like to prevent having site-proof fence with graffiti on it in a year. So that's our thought with how we kind of laid this site out. I know it doesn't conform with what staff normally would like to see as far as the landscape buffer and site-proof fencing around all 4 sides. So just trying to share with you our thought process on this. Currently, there isn't a sidewalk. We'd prefer not to have to spend the money putting in a sidewalk that, quite honestly, probably would never get used. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you have any questions for the owners.
Unfortunately, I didn't find the time to contact the applicant and meet prior to today's meeting. This isn't my ward, so I apologize. And I understand the wish to not add the sidewalk. I do think this is an area where we will see continued development and improvement as the city extends to the west. I think we see that already. And I know that a lot of the surrounding neighbors and area have started to organize and look towards the future of the area and what it might develop into with meetings that I've had with them. So I do think on the sidewalks that probably will be a critical element.
Okay.
So I would like it if you could explore how to make sure that we can accomplish that. On the site-proof fencing, I understand as well the security concerns. As things continue to develop, I do think some kind of site-proof fencing for the area would be ideal. I'm a little bit unsure.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to really interrupt. I would like staff, if they would, to come forward and speak to us about this. I will note that this is the only item on the agenda today for which staff is recommending denial. It's something they don't do very often. I'd like to hear, their thoughts on this application, and very specifically sort of why it is that they're not recommending approval.
Mainly it's based on the remaining residential in the area. There's a house being rehabbed right across the street now, and this is a very visible site with a lot of outdoor storage. We know it's trending toward industrial, and I don't think we have any issue with like an I-1 light industrial where things are indoors. This was just a completely outdoor storage lot is all it is. Another issue is the fence that the applicant's proposing to have on the north and east, a site-proof fence inside the property line with landscaping outside the fence. That strip would tend to just get ignored. So we would prefer, if approved, that the fence be on the property line.
And site-proof.
Yes.
Well, I certainly am in agreement about the sidewalk at a bare minimum, but, the direction in which the neighborhood is trending is a little bit less than clear to me, frankly. There is a lot of industrial in the area, but it seems to me like there is, as you're saying, a home that's being rehabbed. It seems to me like this is definitely an area that we can't, I won't say write off, because that's just how I feel about industrial, but I don't mean it that way. I think we do have to give some thought to issues like outdoor storage and the aesthetics of that. So,
And again, I apologize for dropping the ball on not contacting you guys sooner to discuss this item.
Would you like to take a couple weeks, maybe meet out on the site and discuss
that would be
this item?
helpful if you guys are amenable to that, to come and look at what you guys have going on and understand the project a little better.
Okay, that'd be great.
Fabulous. 2 weeks?
2 weeks would be
Do I
great.
have a motion? Motion?
Sure. A motion to continue for 2 weeks so that I can become more familiar with this project.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to continue this item for 2 weeks, or until March 22nd, let's put it that way. Cast your votes, please.
Actually, I'm going to be out of town that week.
I'm sorry.
Is there a way we can continue that 2 more weeks?
Sure.
4 weeks, I'm sorry.
If that's okay?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So the first meeting in April,
Yes, please.
April 12th.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second to approve, to continue the item to April 12th. Cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
Item 29 is PUD 1675 to rezone 3925 Southeast 59th from PUD 1587 and R1 to PUD 1675.
Good afternoon. For the last time, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, who is also here, Mr. Don Dillingham. This is a site that's currently zoned a mix of R1 and a PUD that allows for some heavy commercial uses currently. What my client seeks to do through this PUD is allow it to be entirely redeveloped into residential, a mix of single-family, duplex, triplex, and quadplex. We did have the opportunity to connect to the existing street grid pattern that exists in this area. The staff does have a couple of TEs, both of which we agree to. We think that this is more consistent with the surrounding area rather than the heavy commercial PUD that was carved out when it was approved last time. Commissioner Highsmith did ask us whether or not we could, on some of the multiplex units, have shared drives rather than large, wide driveways. We do agree to that, so we could add that as a TE. Certainly you'll see that at the platting stage, but we do agree that we can accomplish some shared drives throughout the development. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do have someone who signed up to speak on this matter. Shalonda Sanders. Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Shalonda Sanders, 4004 Jones Boulevard is the church. And I'm here to speak to opposing this development near our church. Just to give a little bit of background, first, thank you for the opportunity to come before you and talk about this issue. We've been in this church in this area, you see kind of on their illustration, since 1993.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Are we talking about the little church there on Southeast 59th?
No, we're talking about this one here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you.
You're welcome, no problem. We've been there in the smaller church since 1993. We expanded in 1999 and created this larger church to which now it is fully paid. And we recently have gone through a transition with our former pastor. He's no longer there, so we're under new administration. It's the last 6 months of transition. And so some of the things that we have done in the area since then is reach out to the community to talk about things that they feel like are necessary for this community. So recently we attended a neighborhood association to talk about what we felt like the community needed in the area. This 2 square mile radius that this church is probably right in the center of is a very high crime volume in that area. So there are a lot of things that are needed in this community, some of which include some after-school programs and some other things there that we've talked to the neighborhood association about and how we could be a better influence in this neighborhood. So we talked with them recently about particularly adding in some things that we feel like will be better in the community. Right now, we currently have a food pantry, which some of the residents partake in, but we also want to expand it where that little, I think this looks like a pot to me, so the handle to this pot that's on their drawing is right next to the east side of our church. We would like to be greedy and say we want all of their property because we feel like we would expand more if history is any indicator of what we have done. But if not, we are even willing to compromise and say, give us the handle so that we can further expand what we are doing in the community, to put a recreational center there, a park for the community. For us, it's more about doing more for the community, and it's a community that is severely in need of some issues. I want to make sure I'm not, that I didn't miss my thoughts in my notes. So again, I think our hope is that we have a renewed commitment and vision to the community. When we first got this, it appeared that this was for them to put in a storage unit, so we were going to come here and oppose that. But once we found out it was a residential area, we are not necessarily opposed to a residential area because we're in the middle of a residential area. We're just saying, do we need as much? We're surrounded by houses. We're surrounded by apartment complexes just up the street on Jones Boulevard. There's 2 apartment complexes. Some of this property are low-income families. And so we're saying that we think we have a lot of residential. We are wanting to know if we should consider doing more for the community, and that's why we're proposing that this space, at least the handle, not be considered in their proposal so that we could open that up to more activities for the community.
Has your church pursued buying any property in the area?
We have not. We are to the left of us, or I guess that's the west of us. There's someone we know that has that property, and we are considering that, but we don't know that it's available, but we definitely want to consider what's to that small part to the east of us. But as I said earlier, we're just in a very new transition, so but we would love the opportunity to do that.
Unfortunately, I might be a little bit too late for that.
Okay.
Okay. We are not in a position to facilitate your church's purchase of this property. I mean, what we're here to decide is whether this particular patch of ground is appropriate for residential development. That's really all we can.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Okay.
Once we realized, I knew today when I got here that was not this, who was purchasing this land said storage. That's what we were told, and so we thought it was a storage, and we were absolutely going to oppose that. But I still want to make my point known.
I appreciate that.
This is my opportunity,
you
right?
had to sit on that bench a long time to make that point.
I was here first, and I'm last on the list.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments?
Anybody else?
Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this item?
Yeah, so briefly, I can put my client in contact with the church in case they had a desire to sell it. The reason that they believe the storage, so the entity that owns it is the Forster Storage, because the current zoning would allow, in addition to the commercial storage now. And so what we're trying to do is transition it away from what we think would be incompatible with the church.
Yes.
So you're going to do the PUD that you've got here, the fourplex, the threeplex, the duplex.
Right.
So that's what you're going to put on the property.
That's right. We're removing the commercial.
I get where when I first read this, started the application, I went, oh, a storage unit.
Right.
No, not at all.
That's
So
right.
now it makes a little bit more sense. So, okay.
I do have one question, David, in terms of, is there any buffer or anything between the church and the development? Will there be, I see it looks like drive on that side.
Yeah, so this is certainly conceptual now. We'll have to plat it. But, on the south, you'll have site-proof fence and backyard. In the handle, that's probably the best description of the pot. You'll see the front of the home, so you'll see the landscape portion of the home adjacent to the church.
Will that exit onto Jones Road?
Yes, we will have a connection to Jones.
Okay.
Anything else? With all that said, I will recommend approval Make a motion to recommend approval of PUD 1587.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of item number 29. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is so recommended.
Thank you.
The remaining items have been withdrawn or continued.
Hallelujah. All right, then, Planning Commission committees? No? Planning Commission members? Anyone have anything they want to share? Planning Department? Development Services? Municipal Counselor's Office? We're just whizzing by today. Citizens to be heard. Anybody else that we didn't get to today that wants to be heard? No? No? No takers? Okay. Other business? What would that be?
Can I appear as a citizen to be heard? These were very expensive. Could I get these back to reuse them?
You've got mine.
You just dust these off for each application, the same one, and just, yeah, exact same stuff, yeah, exactly.
Move approval. Move adjournment.
I have a motion. I have a second. Motion and second to adjourn.
I did.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There you go. We are adjourned.